Hey, what is up, guys? This is Larry with another episode of what I'm calling Candid Finance, which is basically where I just talk about any kind of personal finance or business related topic in a candid, very honest, personal, minimal type editing way. And today I thought I'd tell a story about a time where I actually got scammed, and it's a very true, real story that happened to me. And unfortunately, it was $300 in total that I ended up getting scammed. And, hopefully by sharing this story, others can, have a few takeaway lessons from this, and hopefully it never happens to anybody else. But this basically happened when I was around high school. I think I was probably around 16 at the time. And one of the things I really enjoyed doing, which I still enjoy doing, is just going to Target and just kind of walking around. And so on this particular day, I ended up walking around Target. I parked in the parking lot, and I saw this lady that was selling these roses, these like plastic fake type roses. And she was saying she was trying to raise money for one of her childs that she had, that, she claimed to be, 8 years old or so forth. And she was saying she was just trying to raise money, and that was just selling $1 each for these roses. And I didn't carry any cash. I still never really carry any cash. And so I explained to her, I don't have any money. And I kind of have a soft spot when it comes to kids. One of the very first jobs I ever had growing up was working with kids, actually. And so I ended up saying, you know what, I don't necessarily have any cash, but if you want, we could go into Target together and I could buy, whatever you end up needing for this child, because she claimed she was raising money to, buy essential needs and essential goods for her children. So we went into the store, and, she just went her way. And I said, you know what, you just go your way, and I'm going to go, pick up the things that I want to see or just look around. And we'll meet back up in the front. And so I'm waiting for her at the front, and it kind of takes a while. I'm kind of getting a little bit impatient. And so then I see the lady, and she has a whole cart full of a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, and it was all baby related, but I mean, it was a whole cart full. And I was kind of surprised that she had a whole cart full of random goods. And at the time as well, being 16 years old, I didn't really have any perspective on how much a box of diapers was worth, or how much baby formula was, or anything, how much. I had no perspective on that. And so I was a little bit iffy on whether or not I still want to go through with this. I told her, I was only planning on purchasing just a few things for you, not necessarily buying everything for you. And she said, well, these are really, things that the baby really needs and that my other child really needs. And, I'm just really desperate, and I really don't know what to do. And if you want, I'm still getting paid, I do work, but I don't necessarily get paid until a week from now. So, if you're really that concerned, I could at least pay part of it back, and part of it can be viewed as a gift or, charity or whatever. And so I kind of naively agreed. But at the same time, being 16 years old, raising $300 was not an easy thing to do. I was one of those kids that, early on was working, to the point where I was so young that they kind of had to pay me under the table because it wasn't legally allowed to be paid for, actually working. But anyway, I've always been a saver. So $300, I did have it, but it's still a lot to raise for a kid. So I said, you know what, why don't you give me your phone number, and I'm going to take a picture of your license plate when we leave the store, and that would make me feel more comfortable. I called the phone number to make sure it was hers. And for whatever reason, that made me feel more secure in what I was going to do. And so then they ring it all up. And like I said, I didn't realize it was going to be $300 until they rang it all up. And it ended up being $300. And, I just told myself, I really don't know what I was thinking. I just told myself I'm trying to do something nice here. Maybe I was a little too bit optimistic as far as trusting people. And, and especially at the time, and still even now, I couldn't really imagine somebody ripping off a 16-year-old kid, especially when you're an adult. But that kind of brings me to one important lesson, which is, we can't really be too surprised as far as how far some people are willing to push it. Unfortunately, there are some people that don't necessarily have the best of intentions, and they're willing to scam whoever, they can get their hands on. But anyway, so we checked out, and basically, as you would probably expect, after we parted ways and I took a picture of her license plate, the very next day I tried to text her, call her, and basically could never get a hold of her. And so once again, I was overly optimistic and hoped that maybe I would hear back from her in a week or so. So I waited a few more days and tried to give a call, tried to give a text, and didn't respond to any of that. And I waited about 2 weeks, still kind of every few days texting her, calling her, before I just completely gave up. And at that point, too, I kind of debated, should I call my credit card company and basically explain the situation, or should I call the police or whatever? But at the time, I felt, I knowingly gave her that money. And on top of that, I had waited 2 weeks to report anything. So I kind of thought it was a lost cause at that point. And, it took me a few years to kind of get over the situation. I was pretty disappointed that something like that would happen. Obviously very upset that I lost $300. But, after a few years, I kind of reflected back on that situation. Maybe once again, I'm looking at this all too optimistically, but I kind of view it as, this lady obviously desperately needed that money. Besides the fact that maybe she did still have some money or whatever you may believe that this lady's situation was, the fact that she was willing to go through that and basically scam out a 16-year-old kid, at least to me, shows she's in some type of situation where she feels the need to do that. And so the best I can do is basically just view it as this was a $300 donation I gave to her, perhaps a little bit unwillingly, but I can at least look at it that way, that I at least did some good by giving somebody, the money, hopefully that it ended up actually going to the kids, which obviously, once again, it was all baby-related products that she bought, so there's kind of no way for her to not, unless if she tried to return it, but I had the receipt, so I'm not really sure about that. But anyways, at the end of the day, one of the biggest kind of lessons or reflections I had on this whole story was I was very frustrated at the time about losing $300, and, for a few years, I was still holding on to that grudge of losing $300. But over time, I kind of thought about it, and, basically I kind of thought to myself, that $300 is not going to be the end all be all for my life. It's not going to be the reason that I'm either successful or unsuccessful in life. If I was destined to be unsuccessful and I had bad financial habits and, worked a poor job that didn't necessarily get paid well, that would happen, that's going to happen regardless of that $300. Sure, it would be nice to have, I'd love to have a $300 gift right now, but that isn't necessarily going to, that's not necessarily going to commit me to a poor financial future. Just like getting a $300 gift right now is not necessarily going to be the reason that you or anybody else is going to suddenly be financially successful. A lot of us out there feel like, if I just had this money, if somebody gave me $1,000 to pay off this debt or whatever it is, it would get me out of this certain situation. But at the end of the day, it's really about habits and mindset that leads you to success. But anyway, so I just thought I'd share this kind of personal story. A little bit to kind of go along with that, there was a situation afterwards. I returned back to that same Target maybe like 2 weeks after that. And I still had that same anger, and I was just letting that anger kind of like ruin my life and live my life essentially. But I saw this other lady basically doing the same thing, trying to sell roses, and I confronted her, and she ended up saying that, she couldn't speak English very well and she could only speak Spanish. And some of you may not know this about me, but I'm half Hispanic, so I can speak Spanish at least decently well. And so I told her in Spanish the same thing. I said, I kind of feel like you're pulling off this scam. I don't think you're supposed to be doing this. And, sure enough, once she recognized I knew Spanish, she ran off to a car that, seemed pretty normal, like a, Toyota Camry or something like that. And she drove away. And I just thought it was unfortunate that somebody was willing to, once again, try to scam someone else out there. So like I said, in some ways, this story is kind of a lesson about having a healthy level of pessimism, of just realizing that, there's people out there that are willing to take advantage of generous people out there. But at the same time, on the flip side, if anything like this ever happens to anybody, which I really hope not, but that it's not necessarily going to be, it's not going to break your life. I feel like a lot of people listening to this video, that, you guys are going to be successful out there because you guys are determined. And whether a bad situation, whether you lose $100, whether you break something that's $50, that's not going to be the end all be all. So just be positive. Anyway, so I hope this story, gives a little bit of insight or lesson. I love sharing these kind of personal finance, candid type stories and lessons. Anyway, so if you like personal finance, business, or anything like that, if you appreciate these videos, please hit that subscribe button. I post one of these every Sunday, so stay tuned for that, and I hope to see you in the next one.